The boy from Brine. The town of Brine slept under a thin sheet of snow, its silence broken only by the rhythmic thud of a ball striking a garage door. A boy, tall, wiry, no more than 11, repeated the same motion again and again. The ball bounced back. He adjusted, struck again. No applause, no audience, just the cold and the echo of obsession. His name was Erling Haaland. Most kids in Brine dreamt small. Maybe they'd work on the docks. Maybe inherit the family business. But Erling wasn't most kids. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His actions spoke in a language older than words. A relentless pursuit of something even he couldn't name yet. His father, Erling Haaland, watched from the kitchen window, arms crossed, face unreadable. Once a Premier League midfielder himself, Erling had returned to Norway after his own career was cut short by injury. He'd seen the limelight. He'd felt the roar of the crowd. But tonight, as he watched his son train under a dying sky, he wondered if this boy was chasing the game, or if the game had already claimed him. Inside the Haaland home, trophies lined a modest shelf. None belonged to Erling. Not yet. His sister excelled at athletics. His older brother, a quiet scholar. But Erling was different. Not because he was better, at least not yet, but because he was insatiable. At school he sat alone. Not out of awkwardness, but purpose. His notebooks filled with sketches of goals, stick figures with arrows showing movement, patterns of play. His teachers thought he was distracted. In truth, he was designing a future no one else could see. The town's local club, Brine FK, noticed. They gave him a spot on the youth squad. But even then, he confused them. His touch was raw. His runs were too direct. Coaches whispered, too wild, too unrefined. But every week he stayed after practice. Alone again, always alone. One evening, after missing an open goal during a friendly, Erling didn't go home. He stayed on the pitch long after the floodlights cut out, drilling the same shot until his legs cramped. Erling arrived in silence. He didn't scold him. He didn't praise him. He simply walked beside him, both of them shivering in the dark. "Why do you keep doing this?" he asked finally. Erling's answer was quiet. "Because one day, it has to be perfect." That was the first time Erling understood. His son wasn't chasing a dream. He was trying to build one. From scratch. No shortcuts. No excuses. And so, in the stillness of a small Norwegian town, a boy with too much hunger and too little celebration kept training. Not for the game he played, but for the player he intended to become. The monster awakens. By 17, Erling Haaland wasn't just noticed, he was impossible to ignore. At Molde FK, under the watchful eye of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, something wild and wonderful began to take shape. Where others saw a tall, lanky teenager with awkward footwork, Solskjaer saw potential. A volcano just starting to rumble beneath the surface. Training was brutal. Solskjaer pushed him hard, not out of cruelty, but conviction. "You want to be great?" he asked after one grueling session. "Then train like pain is your shadow." Haaland didn't flinch. He trained harder. No shortcuts, no comfort, just sweat and silence. The transformation was sudden. His body thickened. His sprint quickened. His instincts sharpened. The once clumsy striker became a predator, sensing space before it opened, striking before defenders could react. His breakout performance came against Brann. 4 goals in 20 minutes. It wasn't a match. It was a warning. Erling had crossed a line. There was no going back. Offers came. Scouts flew in from Germany, England, Italy. But he didn't chase the highest bidder. He chose Red Bull Salzburg, a club known not for fame, but for forging killers in silence. It was a decision not based on glamour, but on growth. He wasn't chasing the spotlight. He was sharpening his blade. In Austria, the fire became an inferno. He devoured defenders. In the Champions League, under the bright lights of Europe's grandest stage, he scored a first-half hat-trick on his debut. The world finally looked up. Commentators called it luck. Pundits labeled him a machine. But those who watched closely saw the truth. Precision built from years of chaos. He didn't celebrate like a star. No dances, no chest pounding. Just a jog back to the halfway line, eyes fixed, jaw set. For him, each goal was a stepping stone, not a finish line. Behind the goals were quieter moments, endless stretching to protect his growing frame, ice baths that burned more than healed, lonely nights where doubt whispered loudest. But he never wavered. If pain was the price, he would pay in full. Coaches feared he'd burn out. Teammates marveled at his discipline. Opponents? They simply prayed he'd have an off day. Still, he kept going. What made Haaland terrifying wasn't just his power, it was his focus. He wasn't distracted by fame, by noise, by praise. He moved like someone who had already seen the future and was just catching up to it. By the time Salzburg faced Liverpool, the world expected collapse. Instead, Haaland scored again against one of the toughest defenses in football. Not with flair, but with force. He didn't just arrive. He announced himself. And as Europe's elite lined up for a bidding war, one question hung in the air like fog before a storm. What happens when the monster finds a bigger stage? Manchester, meet the machine. The city buzzed with expectation as Erling Haaland touched down in Manchester. The headlines wrote themselves, the final piece of Guardiola's puzzle. Fans imagined perfection. Rivals braced for chaos. But behind the flashing cameras and million-dollar smiles was a 22-year-old carrying the unbearable weight of inevitability. Pep Guardiola, the cerebral architect of City's empire, didn't bring Haaland in for headlines. He brought him for havoc. Tactical, relentless, silent havoc. Yet beneath the plan was uncertainty. Could this towering Norse battering ram adapt to a team built on precision and poetry? The doubts didn't last long. Opening day. One chance. One goal. Simple. Ruthless. Surgical. Haaland wasn't trying to fit in, he was redefining what fit even meant. Week after week, he tore through the league with a terrifying consistency. Hat-tricks came like clockwork. Defenders collapsed under his pace. Goalkeepers flinched before he shot. And yet, for all the spectacle, Haaland's face barely changed. No showmanship. Just the same stone gaze that once haunted snow-covered fields in brine. But success bred pressure. And pressure bred pain. Injury whispers crept in. Tightness in his groin. Fatigue in his bones. Cameras caught him limping off after games, wrapping ice around his legs like armor cracking at the edges. Guardiola, usually composed, wore the look of a man balancing genius with fragility. Then came the critics. He only scores tap-ins. He breaks the system. City was better without him. They didn't see the extra hours in the gym, the studied movement, the self-discipline that bordered on obsession. Haaland heard it all and said nothing. He let the scoreboard answer. But beneath the goals was a deeper conflict. Erling wasn't just chasing records, he was chasing control. Of his body, of his mind, of a destiny that felt both earned and cursed. Fame had followed him, but peace hadn't. Every touch was analyzed. Every miss exaggerated. There was no room for error, only expectation. And yet, even under this storm, he stayed unshaken. By mid-season, the numbers were absurd. 30 goals by January. A pace no one had seen in a generation. But it wasn't just the goals. It was the silence between them. The poise, the discipline, the brutal clarity of purpose. Pep once whispered to his staff after another clinical finish. He doesn't play football. He finishes it. Still, something lingered. Not fear, not fatigue, but the creeping realization that domination came with a cost. Erling stood in the tunnel before a Champions League knockout match. Eyes closed, fists clenched. Around him, noise, cameras, chaos. Inside him, stillness. The game would begin in moments. But for Haaland, it had started long ago. And as he stepped onto the pitch beneath the floodlights, one thought pulsed in his mind. They still haven't seen everything. The legacy code. There comes a point in every great athlete's journey where dominance becomes routine, and the real question emerges: what will you leave behind? For Erling Haaland, legacy was never about viral celebrations or flashy interviews. It was about impact, quiet, brutal, lasting. After shattering records in his debut Premier League season, Haaland didn't pause to celebrate. 50 goals across all competitions. Most in a single campaign. City lifted trophies. Fans chanted his name across continents. And yet, he remained distant. Not cold, but disciplined. Like a man too aware that history doesn't stop